Hi.
Hiya.
I found a quiet corner in the house.
Can you hear me all right?
I can. I'm just terrified. My daughter's getting put to bed and I'm terrified she's going to start screaming.
Well, I've just done my usual drape. I drape to cover all the sins.
I'm just choosing a very select angle of not messy floor.
It's not easy though, isn't it? It is not easy. Well, where should we start? There's already 29 people on the call, which is wonderful, Karrie. So I'm so pleased and excited to have Karrie on the call today. She's got the most incredible energy. Oh, you were getting a little bit of feedback.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. You hear me? Is that? Oh, that's
yeah, I can't hear any feedback.
That's better. It's gone. And yes, I'm really pleased that today we've got Karrie joining us on our call, and we're going to be talking about a whole range of different things. We've got about an hour as usual. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm Kate. I'm the director of The Big Draw. And Karrie, do you want to do a quick introduction to yourself?
I'm Karrie Fransman, and I'm a comic artist and graphic novelist and visual storyteller and all those words which we use. I like the word comic, really, because that's kind of nice and
skater.
Down and dirty and underground and lowbrow. So I'll take that one. But yeah, we're talking a wee bit about a book which I've done today, which isn't a comic, it's an illustration, a kind of illustrated book. So yeah, I do everything as long as there's visual storytelling in it.
Yeah. And we're going to talk a bit more about all of that. So for anybody who's on the team at The Big Draw, can you just give me the thumbs up that the sound and everything is okay from both of us? Oh, I can see that Sandra's on. Sandra, are we coming over all right? Everything all right from the outside world? So if somebody could just give me the thumbs up who's on the call. Hi, Sarah. All good.
All good.
All good. Brilliant. So we can crack on. So we're going to get a lot to get through. If people have questions, obviously you can put them in at the bottom. I'll do my best to tread out a few questions as we go along. What I find is there's usually so much to talk about with a person. It's not always easy to do that, but I'll try my best to tread out as we go along. And I need to keep an eye on the time as well. So I probably should have found my phone.
I'm trying to drink a cup of tea and hold the phone at the same time.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly. So
I'm trying not to.
Time-wise, I need to keep an eye on the clock. So let's start. Karrie, do you want to just start by talking a little bit about how you got to where you are now? Because you are a huge success. And I know we're going to talk about your new book a little bit.
I'm not sure everyone would agree. But no, I mean, you know what?
But where you started from, I mean, if you call yourself a comics creator, visual storyteller, there's lots of different hats, isn't there? But how did you start off? How did you get to where you are now?
So probably like a lot of you on the stream or listening to this, I started off just drawing stories and just kind of being in my bedroom, scribbling away and like imagining different worlds. And I think at the time I would just draw these things which I thought were like animation. So I remember trying to draw like the 12 Dancing Princesses, and it was just basically...
Oh, I love that story.
Like, you know, it was a comic, but I didn't really know it was a comic. And I used to read things like, Beano and all of that as well. And then basically, I never stopped drawing. So all the way through my life, I was always drawing, and that was my way of making sense of the world. But I also like doing other things. I like making costumes and, building like worlds and like dolls houses and paper cutout 3D things. Yeah. And then basically my parents were like, no way are you going to art college. They're like, you're getting a proper degree.
They were saying don't go to art college.
They did, yeah, they told me I shouldn't. So they wanted me to get like what they considered to be a proper degree. So I went and studied psychology and sociology at university, which, to be honest, that actually probably was really good because I never stopped drawing the entire time. And I would draw, like I remember studying psychopharmacology, which is really difficult. And I would like just draw all of my like I'd have to remember my essays by drawing mind maps of them. So everything was always drawn, and I would always be doing paintings and everything. And then after uni, I discovered comics, and I literally walked into like Waterstones and picked up Ghost World. And of course, I was reading comics before because I was reading, the Beano, but I didn't really understand that as a medium until I saw Ghost World, which is by Daniel Clowes. And I think I'd actually seen it in the cinema, in some like art house cinema in Brighton, and then I'd found it in like Waterstones. So it was really overground, the introduction to that world. And then literally, as soon as I finished, I just phoned my sister, who's really like, she's a fantastic writer and poet, and I was like, we need to make these. These are amazing. You do the writing, I'll do the drawing. But the collaboration never happened because it's so much hard work doing comics. So yeah, basically I just decided to go it alone eventually. And I just didn't stop. I would go to comic conventions and, photocopy my zines and small press, comics, and yeah, like illegally at work while no one was looking, and staple them together and have like a table. And I would just do that. Like I'd stay up till 3 a.m. doing that. I never stopped. It was an addiction. And now I'm here today doing it professionally.
I love the fact that because that really resonates with me when I was growing up. And I wish I'd sort of listened to myself a bit more about it. That idea of learning through map making and the little diagrams and everything. And I can remember I've been doing sort of like history essays and things. And I remember we weren't allowed to write very much on the side. We're given like about that much space. You could maybe to do a timeline. I'm thinking, I don't want to do a timeline. I want to scribble down. I want to do some like shapes for different things. And I want to then make it a diagram. It needs to be a visual to help me work out what I was going to say.
Yeah. It's such a natural way, isn't it? The drawing to learning. And so many people do that. It's funny because I think now they acknowledge it, but
it was so much when I'm considerably older than you, but it was rare. I look back now and just think, yeah, that was all right. It was all right that I did it like that. But it wasn't encouraged.
No. I hope it is now. I hope it is a little bit more, because I remember doing a workshop once with a teenage boy in it, and he kept doodling and drawing. And I remember saying, I was quite young because I started doing like youth work when I was really young, and I remember saying, hey, stop drawing, pay attention. And then my workshop worker said to me, hey, that's helping him concentrate. And I was like, of course it is. That's what I do to concentrate. I do to concentrate. And it just really struck me. And now when I run workshops, I'm always like encouraging people to doodle all the way through if they want, because it really does help, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, I don't know if that's my note. My entire everything is like that. People who know me know that if I'm talking in a meeting or if I'm meeting them and I'm trying to remember what I say, I doodle and I make notes, and those are my notes. That's the visual reminder. And I've been at meetings with other people doing the same, and at the end we've just taken a photo and sent the photo of the scribbles to each other, and that's the minutes of the meeting. and you remember more. I think you really do remember more. I do. I remember a lot more that way. So it's interesting. So you didn't go down the formal route of going and doing a BA in illustration at Camberwell.
I wish I had, though. Sometimes I teach at St. Martin's, and I'm really gutted because I go and like sit in the cafe afterwards, and I just watch all these like trendy art school people with their funky hair and their fancy coats, and I'm just like, I wish I could have done that.
Yeah, but then you can do it afterwards, can't you? It doesn't have to be at that time. You can always come back to these things. So you did your degree, and as you say, then you sort of discovered comics and everything. With the starting to get into the comics, would you describe yourself as self-taught?
Yeah, completely. Absolutely. But I think it's interesting, actually. Me and my husband are quite similar in this way. Both of us really like learning. I think part of the process of our career in any project we take on involves an element of never having done it before, and pushing yourself. So everything, I'm always terrified when I say yes to something, because more often than not, I don't know how to do it, and I'm just learning that. And honestly, I couldn't just produce the same thing over and over again. I couldn't draw in the same style over and over again, or create things in the same medium. So I think being self-taught is kind of, I'm just constantly teaching myself all the time. So after university, I ended up doing an advertising degree, which was copywriting and art direction. And I thought, okay, like I've gone from like, psychology and sociology. How do I get back to visual art? And that seemed like a stepping stone. But very quickly, I realized that the ad world was not made for weirdos like me. and socialists like me either, right? Why did a socialist end up in advertising? But you know what?
yeah, that's actually a very good point.
What was I doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, I did learn quite a lot, and what I learned was like how to really keep an idea completely succinct and how to create mass media which can really attract people's attention, and all the tricks which they use in advertising for communication. I actually could then adapt and use it when I'm doing animation about migration or a comic about garment factory workers. I can use those same things I learned. So it actually ended up being really useful, I think,
So
as a kind of education in some visual art.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that you started off that whole thing when you were younger, collaborating, you doing drawing, your sister doing the writing and everything. And again, that's something that I recognize a lot. I'm one of 3 girls. I'm the old one, I'm the oldest. But we did a lot of that growing up as well. Yeah, and it was making imaginary worlds, and making books and doing illustrations and the maps of these like fantastic worlds and what you wore and what you eat.
There always had to be a good map, didn't there?
All sorts of things, yeah. I think I remember seeing one at the front of Lord of the Rings or something. I'm thinking, that's
and Tolkien,
yeah. So that whole, I get that, and it sounds like you're sort of doing that now with your husband, aren't you, to a degree? Because that was one of the ways. I'm just going back. I'm just going to think. So for people on the call, Karrie has had a connection and involvement with the Big Draw for a while, and really with the sort of the power couple that is you and your husband. So I know that
I love when people call us power couples. Like,
you are
cleaning soup off my daughter's chin today. I do not feel like a power couple.
We'll have to do that. We're going to get on to being a mother as well later on in the conversation. But no, I think you are absolutely a power couple. But yeah, so with Johnny coming in, it was with the digital drawing app, wasn't it? That going back 2010, I think it was before I came in 2013. But I know that there was involvement there, and then so I know that you've been doing workshops and everything for the Big Draw for over those years. So there's been that ongoing connection, because drawing is important for you as well in your in terms of communicating a story. So that's sort of the long-standing connection, and we're hoping to we're going to carry on doing more with you, Karrie, as we go forward. So I wanted to just start to think a little bit more about the projects that the types of projects that you choose, because I think this is important. And you said earlier it was interesting going into advertising for, thinking about it's to make money and all those sorts of things. But actually, in terms of your approach to life, your outlook, your ethics, you take that very seriously. And actually the sorts of projects that you choose to develop and create, I think, are very interesting, because they are often issue-based or championing a cause, aren't they? So it would be good to hear a little bit more about the types of projects that you choose to collaborate on and why.
Yeah, I think I'm repenting for my years in advertising. I'm trying to save away going to hell for them. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so I think the first project I did, which was, actually probably, down that path of ethical. Actually, you know what? Before I did some comic journalism. I started doing comic journalism, and I'd pitch illustrated articles to The Guardian, and I did one I went to the Hay Festival in Lebanon and did one for The Telegraph, and I did one on comedy and aggression for the New Statesman. And I was starting to, I think you know, it's weird. In the UK, we're just not that into illustrated articles. There's a few people who do them, but it's really difficult to convince newspapers to give you that same space and turn it into an illustrated article. But my God, why aren't we all read that? That's just so much more exciting than a written article, in my opinion. And there are some really amazing, you know, comic journalists. Obviously, Joe Sacco, who's just head and shoulders above everyone. But yeah, so I was really like pitching that, and it was exhausting. I'd like convince one editor, and they'd let me run one article, and then you'd have to do it all again for a new newspaper, and you know, it was very slow and laborious. But basically, they yeah. So I then got approached by the British Red Cross, and they actually found me. I think because they knew I was doing comic journalism at the time, and they said that they wanted to do a story about an Iranian teenager. At the time, I think there was like it was quite a small number comparatively. It was just before, you know, what is titled the refugee crisis in Syria. So it was the 2013, and they, yeah, I think there was like 1,000 unaccompanied children who were coming into the UK every year alone at the time. And I predict it's, well, obviously COVID changed things. I don't know what the situation with COVID, but since then I'd assume it's grown. So I was invited along to interview. I actually interviewed two teenage refugees, one from Afghanistan and one from Iran, and we ended up going with Iranian, and telling his story through comics. And it was just such a great experience. The person, Rosie Stewart, was the one who came up with the idea. So they did it completely, you know, by themselves in a way. And she worked in PR in British Red Cross, and she'd really fallen in love with comics, and then walked into a comic book store, and she was like, how would I use, you know, comics as a medium to spread the message of you know, child refugees? And they recommended me. We got in touch, and we created a 21-page comic about Ibrahim's story. And it was just such an amazing experience, because I mean, that was 2013, so it's like, you know, 8 years later. 8 years? No. Yeah. And math brain is just dead. But it's like I'm still getting people talking about that. They had so many views of that comic. People really engaged with it. They were coming onto the website, they were reading the entire story. It was getting passed around. It was you know, being printed out and read by like members of the Home Office after conferences. You know, we had like Neil Gaiman and Simon Pegg tweeting about it. It's just, to this day, I did a TEDx talk about it. It was like really, it spread like wildfire. And I think that's the joy of the medium. It really is the medium, because it's so accessible, and it reaches people on all levels. And what you're trying to do is create empathy. It's as simple as that. You know, you're just trying to, and comics are a beautiful medium for that, because you can really, you know, put your own, I think, in fact, in Scott McCloud's The Understanding Comics, he talks about empathy and how comics are very simplistic, and unlike photography. So you really can put the faces of your loved ones onto the faces of a drawing, and you can empathize even more. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was just such a great example. And then since then, like, refugee comics seem to have found me in a way. Like, I'm often getting, so I did a project with the Red Cross, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent. I did stuff with Christian Aid, and then I got in contact with Positive Negatives, and they are an amazing organization based in SOAS, who basically is run by Ben Dix, and he did actually a TEDx talk, which you can find online, which is super interesting. And he's you know, really brilliant, enthusiastic, amazing person. But he started up this organization which basically uses the medium of comics and animation to talk about global humanitarian issues. So he collaborates artists with researchers and academics and NGOs, and they've published research which will be maybe sitting in a dusty library somewhere being read by, you know, 100 people, and suddenly we can reach mass audiences. Yeah. So I think it's like super interesting. I've just been reading Leonardo Shapiro's comments on also doing psychology and sociology. Yay, there's more. And also about apartheid South Africa. Yeah, my parents actually were from apartheid, South Africa.
Oh yeah, so during apartheid in South Africa, certain written journalism was banned and censored. So comics and cartoons were used to spread political messages.
Wow, that's amazing. My parents literally
And
were and being anti-apartheid activists in South Africa and grew up there. But Leonard, if you can send me a link with any of those comics, I would absolutely love to see them. If you've got any links for them, I need educating. So yeah, if you it'd be amazing.
I can follow up days and do an introduction to you both if
Oh,
that's
that'd be great. Thank you. So yeah, so then basically positive negatives has we've done a bunch of really interesting projects about we did one about Eternal Zoom, one about Eritrean refugees based on interviews there, and just done one dispelling myths around migration, and we did one about like animal behavioral research into white storks and their journey. But I'm always allowed like a level of complete creative freedom, which is fantastic. So I can, I created a Eternal Zoom comic, which is when you continuously move into a picture, and it's on a loop, and it tells the story of Eritrean refugees. And that's another completely experimental thing. It had never been done in a narrative way before. Me and my husband, Jonathan Plackett, collaborated on it, and again it's been showcased in 12 countries. It was in the Imperial War Museum, it was in House of Illustration. So it's like these are things which are just using the research which exists there, but engaging a mass audience with it.
I would absolutely. I mean, that I love all of the work that you're doing, but that Eritrean piece is amazing, and I would recommend everybody on the call to check it out and have a look at it. I mean, the graphics are really beautiful, and obviously the voiceover is wonderful as well.
Yeah, Lula did that. She's amazing. Yeah,
as well. But I think it is so compelling, the going through into the continuous and really just so sad. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's so impactful. I think that's what I'm saying. It's so impactful. It's all delivered beautifully, but the topics that are being tackled in it are so challenging, and it does it, and it's much more impactful for me than watching a different type of storytelling narrative, perhaps.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like I'm always looking for like a new way to tell a story and a new thing to play with. So the Eternal Zoom was one, and if anyone wants to check it out, it's called. You can search for it under North Star Fading, or you can go onto Positive Negatives website, or you can go into my Instagram. I think that actually the image is black for some reason because it was like a few seconds of black before the video started, so you can find it. But yeah, it's really interesting because the most recent project I've done with Positive Negative, they asked me to do an animation, but I don't actually know how to animate. So I thought, how am I going to do that? So I thought I'm going to film a kind of pop-up book, a moving book, and I'm going to present the book and kind of act it out with my hands and just film my hands presenting this book. And it was a solution to a problem I had. But what we ended up with, it's not out yet, should be released soon. But it was this, a completely new way of doing an animation. It's kind of performing a pop-up book in a way. And it's Positive Negative really allows me to take those experiments. But it's interesting because the different mediums, like the Eternal Zoom, I saw these a few, I think it was really early on in the 90s. I remember seeing one of these kind of weird, trippy Eternal Zoom things. And it was for like an image, and it was all kind of, acidy, like, zooming into the picture. And I thought, no one's ever done a narrative with that. Why don't people use that for storytelling? But what it became when you applied a narrative to it was it really drags you on the path of the refugees. So you join these Eritrean refugees as they leave their village.
You feel that momentum and that journey with them, I think, and especially because you're going through into the Zoom all the time, you really feel that movement, almost that physical movement, that journeying.
And it's kind of almost like, I didn't really think deliberately go so well, but it's nice because it forces you to be the one on the journey, so you're with them. So again, that's just increasing empathy. And it's funny because with the most recent one we've done with the pop-up book, weirdly the page turns are really interesting because you're always wondering what's on the next page. Every time you turn a page of the book, it's got that, you want to continue seeing what's next, and the suspense. And it's funny because I showed it to my my niece and nephew and my daughter who's at 3, and that's always a really good test because they managed to watch full 7 minutes talking about inequality and migration with all these statistics, and you're like, okay, if I can get the 3-year-old and keep their attention for 7 minutes, then it's doing its job, right?
Actually, there's a question here about somebody from someone's daughter, and it just says, it's my daughter wonders, when you're drawing the comic, are the panel borders drawn by hand or in software packages like InDesign?
Yeah, I definitely always favor hand. I think, like, don't worry about software packages. You can get, like, there's Manga Studio, which everybody loves, and various other software packages, but you really just need to be, and you don't even need panels, you know, like, dare I say it? But, you know, like, comics is such as, you know, you really have to practice and practice and practice. It's a lot about how you space panels and speech bubbles and how you move the eye across the page. It's always sort of from top left to bottom right. So your eye moves across images as it does across text. If you're British and reading your languages from left to right. Whereas in fact, you know, in Arabic or Hebrew or Japanese comics, it's right to left. So there's a system of comics, a kind of semiotics. And you really, that's the most important thing, kind of getting to grips with that and realizing that it's very much not about just words and pictures. It's always about that language. And the best way to learn that is to read loads of comics and to practice. And all you need is a pen and paper. It's the most accessible medium. You don't need anything expensive. It's not like photography or film. Anybody can do it. It's a really, I always say it's like a socialist medium.
Well, it's socialist. I love that. So just picking up a bit on the thread around what a fantastic tool comics are in terms of starting to look at some of these more challenging subject areas. And, you know, we talked about quite a lot of the political stuff from refugees and some various sort of different issue-based projects that you've been working on. So if we start to think about, because you do have a book that is out at the moment, and we need to publisher of the book, because I know that they very kindly shared this for us. So I believe it's Faber and Faber, is it not? So thank you.
This is a product placement.
Our Zoom Instagram live on our Instagram live online on social media. That was really, really good of you. But yeah, so there's the book. So let's have a look, Karrie.
It's Gender Swapped Fairy Tale. It's published by Faber and Faber.
Yeah. So this is an amazing book, and I think it starts to thread together some of the different things that we've already touched on. You go on, Karrie. You say. I was going to say.
Yeah, I can do the spiel. I'm used to doing the
algorithm and everything, but you're much better at explaining it.
So so Gender Swapped Fairy Tale came around originally. Actually, it started off when my husband Jonathan Plackett. I define him as he's kind of like a digital inventor, whiz kid kind of guy. I guess that he just sits in his room and just makes things which people play with online. That's the best way of describing it. And he went to the shops and he was looking at the headlines in newspapers, and he saw, you know, it was when Nicola Sturgeon met Theresa May for the first time. I think it was 2013. I don't know. It was a while ago, maybe later. Anyway, my dates are awful. But he had a look, and there were loads of front headlines which were talking about the shoes they were wearing, and he was like, what would the world be like if we swapped the genders of that? And, you know, Barack Obama met Cameron for the first time, and all they were talking about were their shiny brogues. So he was like, well, what would happen if I could create an algorithm which swapped gender in text, and how would that impact on things? So he went home and did that, and then he came and he showed it to me, and I was like, wow, he was like, maybe we could do a website and we could swap, you know, articles and gender. And I was like, well, fairy tales, we should find public domain fairy tales and we should put them through the algorithm, and then we get to read them completely, like, for the first time. So I was like, wow, like, that would be super interesting, and I'd love to illustrate the new world. So we got that experience of being readers of our own book, because we read it, you know, as if from new. And I kind of, there were certain things which I really predicted. I was like, okay, we're going to get, you know, princesses in shining armor racing to rescue sleeping princes. But what I was really surprised about was how ingrained gender is, and this gender binary, this idea that we put everything into a masculinity or femininity, and how it's ingrained into the language which we write in, the stories which we tell, the characters which we allow people to, the roles we allow people to have. Things like, just a few examples, men would always go first. So it was mostly always brothers and sisters, men and women. The names of the men would go first. It would be Hansel and Gretel. And suddenly it's Gretel and Hansel, and sisters and brothers, and you know, the woman and her husband. But it's not even the woman, it's usually the banker or the baker or the merchant and her husband. And you're already going, oh, whoa, because in my head I'm a card carrying feminist, and I would still have assumed that you know, the merchant is a man. It's just really interesting. So is it what's the result of gender swap fairy tales is basically a text which really challenges your own unconscious biases, and makes you kind of, we wanted to shine a light on gender binaries in society and ask people to question this dual masculine feminine thing which we have. But the interesting thing is, some people say, oh, but you know, you created this swap. I mean, is this a utopia? But it's not. It's a dystopia, because now women are in charge and have always held the power, and men are a bit, you know, more submissive. However, men get to play really good roles. So men get to be, you know, they get to be rescued. They get to be kind-hearted. They get to be self-sacrificing. They get to be fathers. They get to be men who really want to have children, which is really interesting, because we often say, can anyone, and I'll see in the comments if any of you can do it, can anyone think of a mainstream story in film, books, television, which has a male character who wants to be a father, and he's the main character, and it's about his story? And it's really interesting, because it's quite an unusual story, whereas we live in a society with loads of men who want to be fathers, but why aren't we telling their stories? And now our book, having done the gender swap, there are 3 or 4 men who want to be fathers. Anyway, that's the long version. Sorry.
I think it is, and it's so interesting. So I know we were chatting about this the other day, and I've discussed it with, oh, somebody said Pinocchio.
Yeah, Pinocchio. That's a good one.
Very
that's a good one.
Very
Not had that one before. That is true.
Yeah, yeah.
How does Pinocchio start? Yeah, he does want. Does he want to be a father? Or does? Yeah, he wants a boy, doesn't he? Yeah, that's a really good example.
Yeah. So I think.
Oh, someone asked, do you know if more women buy the book than men? It's really interesting, because the click-through rate of women interested in the subject is much higher than men, but the response of the book, we get a lot of reviews and feedback from men, but I think a lot of them aren't like necessarily clicking on it. They're finding it, and then I think maybe women are passing the book on to men, and then they're responding about it and talking about it online. Yeah, Edward Scissorhands, Astro Boy. Astro Boy's a good one.
Oh, we're getting a few.
We're getting a few. These are good. I've got to keep notes, because I always ask this question. You guys have come up with the best amount of stories so far.
But so thinking about the book and how you approach. So basically, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because so you put the stories in that you want to choose. You put the algorithm, and they basically pumps out the other end, and then you're like, okay, so and then it just gives you what you have to then go and make the story. And I just love that so much. And I think I love it because it's not a clumsy sort of very simplistic, oh, we'll just make that and that. It's far more nuanced and subtle, which I think then means that when it comes to be read, it's going to be much more multi-layered and just as much fascinating for children. I mean, I've got my 2 girls who keep trying to come in, who are 9 and 10, who would love it. But it's also going to be interesting for a grown-up reading it, isn't it? And I think it's exactly what you said, Karrie. I remember when we were talking about this the other week, And you were saying it's really, you don't realize, even if you like to think that you're set as a person yourself, you know, you're sort of strong feminist woman, all this sort of stuff. And it's that, you know, the miller and her husband, and immediately like, oh, it just sounds wrong in my brain, but it shouldn't sound wrong. And it's those ingrained things as a woman that you hear them and you just think, yeah, and you just don't even realize.
It's weird, isn't it? It's like people, yeah, like one thing which I've noticed is whenever I see an animal, I'll say to my daughter, "Oh, look at that squirrel! Isn't he so cute?" Or I'll say, "Good afternoon, Mr. Magpie," or something like that, and it always defer to the masculine, which is really interesting. As it's like, you know, I was reading her The Gruffalo the other day, which is written by a woman, you know, Julia Donaldson, and in the original Gruffalo, all the mouse and the snake and the fox and the Gruffalo are all male. It's really, you know, often animals are just referred to as male. But it's, yeah, I think everything needs a good gender swap. But I think, you know, the whole point of the gender swap is to examine the power imbalance, and not to create a utopia, because there's still an imbalance when you swap it. And I think, you know, that's the point. We understand that today, you know, I think nowadays people are beginning to explore gender and understand that there's all these, you know, multitudes of gender, from gender non-binary and trans and agendered and other gendered and queer and all these gender identities, which people are beginning to understand. But I really think it's almost the younger generation, you know, the generation below me, who's starting to explore that in a way which my generation probably explored sexuality. And I think, you know, it's really important to examine and critique this binary, and to look at how it's relevant to all of us, to, you know, any, you know, middle-class white man like my husband, who's not seeing representation of fathers in society. Gender is a relevant subject to him just as much as it is to, you know, somebody who's maybe trying to explain their, you know, gender queerness to their parents or their grandparents, you know. So yeah. I'm hoping it's kind of multi-gender, but yeah, sorry, multi-age. But actually, the Faber actually publicized it as a book for adults and children, and we do get quite a lot of adults reviewing it and being interested in it as well as children. And I think that that's the whole point. You can read it to your kid and you're doing the brain work. It's actually quite an intellectual exercise for you, whereas the kid's just being exposed for the first time to a story about a monstrous, ugly beast woman who basically, her husband, you know, she's held this man captive against his will, and he's learning to love her despite her flaws and her ugliness, which is a great, you know, we never see that character, the female character. We often see it as a male one. Yeah. Oh yeah, people are saying Ponyo, yeah, by the way. I love Ponyo. I'm such a Ponyo fan. But you know what? The father is still a bit trying to control the daughter, and even though he's chasing her, he's trying to control her and lock her up. And the mother does come in Ponyo and solves everything at the end. So it's definitely more of a controlling father, I think, in that instance. But I love Ponyo, such a fan.
I want to just bring, I mean, I know it's been going down very well, but you did have an amazing, a very, very glowing review from one particular newspaper that you might not have necessarily expected.
Well, I'm trying to think. We got some really great reviews. We got like a brilliant review in The Guardian, and we got some fantastic writers. But yeah, the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
That's the one which we didn't expect. I think like it's brilliant that the Daily Mail gave it you know, we don't want to preach to the choir. We want this to be a book which people who've never thought about gender can find really accessible. And that's one of the nicest things. There's been so many rewritings of fairy tales which have done a brilliant job. We could not have rewritten a fairy tale better than Angela Carter or Philip Pullman, you know. We'll leave that to them. They're doing a very fine job of that. But by not rewriting, what we've done is laid bare these unconscious biases and things which we ourselves would have unconsciously probably fallen into the traps of. One example I find is there's been a lot of rewritings of fairy tales in children's books, and you get a lot of tomboy princesses. So you get, you know, princesses who are dirty and muddy and wearing trainers and don't care. But what you don't get is feminine princes, it's still considered a thing to be mocked if boys are sensitive or if boys cry or if boys, you know, it is feminized men are much more controversial in our society than masculinized women. Everyone's allowed to be masculine, no one's allowed to be feminine. So it's like that's still something which isn't being written about enough. I think it's starting to get really gorgeous examples, like Juliana the Mermaid. That's just such a gorgeous, beautiful book. But yeah, let me just read this comment. Addressing the unconscious bias is the most constructive element because they can make a change, and a bias is not intentional. It's creating the awareness which makes us sit up and rethink the flaws in the system. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, Zimi. Like, you're really trying to, you know, observe ourselves in a way and how we react. And I'm not perfect. You know, I would have always said, oh, great, I'm a feminist, I'm signed up. I couldn't, this wouldn't be anything which could teach me, but this book has taught me some of my biases. So, yeah, it's been really interesting.
I think it's one of those books that's quietly sort of almost goes a bit under the radar, because we were talking about this the other day. I know that there's been some other books that have come out in other parts of the country, and certainly in other parts of the world, that has explored some of this, not with the algorithm or anything, but and there's been a backlash, unfortunately, because they've been talking about trans rights and gender fluid and that. So it's still for some, it is still going to be a bit controversial for some people. But I think because it's done in the format, because of the medium of comics and cartoon, all things that we talked about earlier, you can almost sort of slip things through, can't you?
Yeah, I mean,
like a quiet revolution.
A quiet revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'd hope it's the kind of book which people who don't understand gender can pick up, and that you just say, well, if they said, oh, it's like this, you could say, well, what did you observe? What do you think? What are your thoughts on it? You can never kind of avoid that. And I think putting the power in the reader's hands, the analysis is in the reader's hands. We're not preaching. I think that's less threatening in a way to people. But I think it's sad that this subject is controversial. I mean, obviously it's so important that we talk about human rights and we talk about gender issues. And I think, yeah, like I want this to be a conversation people can have. We all should be having this conversation, whether you're trans, whether you're a genderqueer, whether you're cis white male, we should all be talking about gender. It confines all of us in a way, and it's something which we can come together and explore. And I think hopefully this book does that in an accessible way, by just looking. But you know what? There's so many other options, I think, in terms of there's so many other options in terms of like what you can swap. You can swap. You could do class swap. You could do sexuality swaps. There's so many algorithms which you could create to do different swaps and race swaps, and to shine the light on different power imbalances. We can't obviously do all of them, but if anyone is interested in that, I'd always be interested in being contacted and see like if we can assist that or advise or talk about it.
There's an offer. So
they have to be the right stories, don't they? They always have to be the story which shows that imbalance and then swapped. Someone says, love your illustration in the book. Is it mainly watercolor? Okay, look, I actually prepared for this. Bought my tools. Okay, so this Dr. P.H. Martin is the watercolors I use, and they are super colorful and really, really, beautiful, beautiful colors. And you just put a tiny drop in them. And then I get detail over it with this brush pen. Clean color real brush. My aunt just bought me a bunch of these beautiful brush pens, and I just love them. I don't know if they're like...
Yeah, it's back to front on it's going to be reversed.
Sorry. They're called Clean Color Zig Real Brush Pens. I'll take a photo. I can put them on my stories and Instagram afterwards.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great.
But remind me if I don't. My brain is like a sieve these days. And then these Stabilo fine liners. But you know what? I'm not picking stuff for, like, I don't have a great knowledge about the quality of materials. So if anybody, somebody said, this is what I came for. They're talking about the materials. And also, this is my paintbrush, which I love. I'm going to put it against my white forehead. A little, like, you know, angular brush, which is really lovely because you can get tiny little details and then kind of big flat. GSM paper thickness. You know what? 300, I think. I'm so terrible at all of this.
So we've got just under 15 minutes left, Karrie.
Okay.
There's a few things that it would be great for us to thread out so that we know that we can try and cover as much as I know we wanted between us. And so one of the things, so if I just say what things that I was hoping that we could thread out. So in terms of cartoonists and the fact that there are incredible women, female cartoonists out there, but there is still an imbalance there. And I think particularly in terms of satirists, political cartoonists. So there's a...
Yeah, you're not seeing enough
no.
women in newspapers doing political comics.
No.
Henny Beaumont and Kate Evans are two massively, brilliantly talented, amazing political comic artists who you should absolutely chase down. Whenever they're shortlisted for awards, they are the only women in amongst the sea of men. So I'm happy to pass on names. If anyone ever wants any recommendations for the kind of whatever they're looking for in the comic world, then I'm really happy to pass on names. And actually, there's also a queer cartoonist and cartoonist of color database and disabled cartoonist databases, all based in America, which but you can actually search for artists in the UK as well. So if you've got a project and you want to have better representation, then check out those databases, and you can search according to area, country, whatever. So yeah, queer cartoonist, cartoonist of color, and disabled cartoonist database. If you Google that, you'll find that. So that's really good if you're wanting to diversify your fan list.
Why do you think it is, Karrie? Why do you think, thinking about some of the newspapers, why do you think that it's still dominated in terms of the satirist, the political? Why is it more still, even today, despite this huge talented pool of women out there doing this area? Why is it still feels a little bit like it's a bit closed? And
I don't know, it's interesting. Hannah Berry, who was the comics laureate recently, produced she kind of did a poll and you know, found out the stats for what we're like in terms of representation and gender. And I remember I think we were really good represented in terms of like diverse sexualities and gender identities. And we're kind of equally represented-ish, but with some room to improvement in terms of race. I think we're quite well represented in terms of disability. I can't remember gender, which is really frustrating. But there's certainly women cartoonists going into certain... I say cartoonist, but it actually should be comic artist, because cartoonist is a style, whereas comic is a medium. But yeah, there are more, you know, women doing like graphic novels and women identifying people doing graphic novels and stuff. But actually, yeah, things like newspapers were not being seen on. And they're the big, you know, originally comics back in the US, they were very white, very male. And, you know, that's why you get all these really big names like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. And, you know, they're all the white men who dominated in the kind of 80s. And I think things are changing because comics are really accessible. And so people can very easily start up doing their own comics and find their own audience and talk about their own experience. Whether that's, you know, coming from a disabled perspective or, you know, a BAME perspective, you get so many interesting examples and opportunities to see other people's worldviews. So I think it's more that the big establishments like the newspapers or the awards are still only mostly recognizing the men. But in terms of talent, in terms of people just creating comics and putting them out there, I think that we're actually pretty well represented compared to most mediums. However, I do think race-wise, we're pretty similar to the UK population, but there's room for improvement. I think a little bit of improvement for race. But in terms of the other categories of minorities, we are fairly well represented. But yeah, it's a case of the people who are judging, the people who are putting panels on, the people who are giving the money out tends to be the white men who are winning that, as it is with everyone.
Indeed. So the other thing I want to do, because again, we need to pack as much in, because I'm sure there's tons of hearts for you, Karrie. They just keep on coming up. So um,
I wish I could give hearts back.
lovely. So if the people on the call, or as I say, well, this will stay on our Instagram and we'll put it onto YouTube, so it'll be a resource as well. If there's anybody on the call that is wanting to develop their own career in this area, one of the things you talked to in terms of like pitching ideas, pitching to the papers.
Yeah.
Have any tips?
Oh my God, I love doing this. It's one of my favorite subjects. I'm actually running I don't know if there's spaces, there must be because it's online, but Ladies Do Comics. I'm running a workshop on pitching at one of their residencies quite soon. And I absolutely love talking about pitching because I've taken all the secrets from advertising and put them in to the comic world. So basically, it's about attracting people's attention, summing up your ideas simply, and leaving them wanting to find out more. That's the 3 aims you need to achieve when you send a pitch. And a pitch is like a very short advert. And in the way an advert grabs your attention, talks about why this idea is different from all the other ideas and why it's interesting, and then leaves you on a cliffhanger. That's what you've got to achieve with the publisher. You've got to do it really simply and really in a really succinct way, because they have not got a lot of time, and you've got to make images which are super eye-catching and interesting. And you've got to think about where you fit into their reading list and how you differ from everybody else. But ultimately, your job is to entertain them and to show them that have fun, enjoy it, some of that quickly I don't know if we've got any time for any tips to start creating your first comic.
Start your first comic. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, because that will definitely get you absolutely fired up about the medium. And then just read a bunch of comics, but just pick up a pen and paper and try and tell a story which is meaningful to you, maybe something which has happened in your life. I think, it's such an instinctive medium that I think we were all probably making comics when we were little and we just forgot how. We just need to remember.
We need to rediscover reconnect with our childhood cartoon making and book making. There's a lovely comment. So it says, thanks so much. You and your husband are the dream team power couple for sure. Oh,
thank you so much, Sumi. That's very sweet of you. We very, very, very much don't feel like we are, but
we could do another one, can't we, Karrie? So someone said so.
Yeah, we could talk for days, couldn't we? We should do one of these marathons.
So we have got a few minutes left. So, I mean, the other things that I had COVID, but I mean, maybe we don't want it. It's up to you. We don't have to talk about COVID.
It's impacted, for
but
people,
also
right?
A mother as well. So
that's tough for people too. Motherhood and COVID.
Motherhood and COVID, yeah. I mean, whether COVID and lockdown has it shifted your approach, your practice in any way, and just how you're juggling everything, because obviously you've got a little one as well.
Oh my God, having a kid is just knackering. It is so difficult, and it definitely impacts women through maternity leave. I think it really is tough. I think one really nice thing which we actually did with a bunch of women, there's a group called Mothers Who Make, and a lot of us comic women got together and created our own group about experiences of being a mother and a comic artist. And we actually did like a talk at Birkbeck, and we all brought our little babies along and tried to talk and look after, and Lyra was like 1 year old and she was running around and she bashed her head, and I was trying to do the talk. Actually, there's a wee video on my Instagram of that. But yeah, like that is what your life is. It's just such a juggle. It's really tough. And you know what? Women at the moment with homeschooling, they've been more impacted in terms of homeschooling and job security during COVID. So that's a massive link. But I did read that men are being more involved fathers because they're more at home and they're more involved with fathering.
Out in the Guardian, I don't know.
Yeah, so there's a greater impact, but then there are some benefits. Oh, it's really nice. Can I just say thank you to all of you guys for coming? Like, I really appreciate it. And you know what? Anyone who wants to hit me up on Instagram and ask any questions, I can talk about GAFM
that's such a generous offer.
I'm material.
Taking you up. And for people that are putting the links in, so I think there was a few links that were put in. I'm not sure it doesn't save, so you'll need to send them to me, and I can always just send them on to Karrie. So those were from Leonard. Leonard was putting some really interesting links in about the the artists, the comic artists over
Oh
in
yeah, I'd really like
Apartheid.
to see that.
Yeah, so
Absolutely. And we've got if you
Leonard.
want to find out more about Gender Swap Fairy Tales, we've got a website, genderswapfairytales.com. You can buy prints, but we've got a chunk of the profit going to Plan International UK, which is children's equality, gender equality charity. And also we've got free learning resources there if you're a teacher and you want to learn more about that. And you can go on my website, karriefransman.com, to see any of the work which we've talked about. And Instagram. I'm here. But yeah, I don't know if you can copy all the links so I can read all those.
I don't think they copy over, unfortunately. It's not like a Zoom or so I'm saying if people I mean, you're very easy to find online, aren't you, Karrie? So if people have problems, if they want to send them to the stuff, to the big drawer, I can just send them on to you. So that's fine.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and have a really good evening.
Yeah, we probably need to wrap it up there. But thank you so much, lovely. Thank you for all of your time and your energy. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, and Kate, thank you so much for inviting me, because it's always a pleasure. I feel like we're just chatting like over cake or something, like we used to in the real world.
I know. Would you reinvent the Beano from Willie, the architect sketchbook? There you go.
Oh my God. You know what? What's it called? The Phoenix. That's what you need to read. The Phoenix is like the new Beano. It's really beautiful. Check that out if you're looking for a Beano itch to scratch.
I think we might do another. I think we have to do a follow-up, won't we, Karrie? Quite soon. Yeah.
Oh, and we should mention we're going to do a crafternoon, aren't we, with the big drawer?
We're going to do a crafternoon. Yeah, I think we're just pinning down the date yet, so we need to just double check on the date. But we'll tell everybody about that in the next couple of weeks. It'll be in the news.
And that'll be adult and kid friendly.
Indeed, yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you so much for your time. Lovely to see you, and we'll speak again soon.
Brilliant.